Most people have heard the story. An old Inuit elder, too weak to keep up, gets placed on a floating chunk of ice and pushed out to sea to die. It's one of those things that sounds so brutal and so specific that you just assume it must be true. And the fact that you believe it, that's actually the most interesting part of this whole story. This video is about what ancient humans really did to their elderly when survival got desperate. And I'll be honest with you, the real version is both less dramatic and significantly darker than the ice flow story, because the myth turns out to be mostly fiction. But what actually happened, that's something most history channels won't touch, and there's one thing the fossil record reveals at the very end of all this that completely flips the entire narrative on its head. Stick with me, because that last part is the one that actually changes how you see people. Let's start with what you think you know. The image of an old person drifting away on a sheet of ice is burned into the cultural imagination. It shows up in jokes, in movies, in casual conversation. People reference it constantly when talking about how we treat the elderly. The problem is, there is no evidence to support the claim that elderly people were sent to sea on an ice float, and it would have been logistically difficult to even pull off. Think about it. You'd need a detached floating piece of ice near shore, large enough to hold a person at the exact moment you needed it. It's possible that a conflation of two scenes from a 1950 novel led to the popular idea of old people being set adrift on ice floes. That novel, Top of the World, by Hans Rüsch, was later adapted into a 1960 film, The Savage Innocents, directed by Nicholas Ray, and that's likely where the image really stuck in the public mind. So a novel, a movie, and 60 years later, half the world thinks they know a fact about Inuit culture. Here's the thing though, just because the ice floe image is almost certainly fiction doesn't mean nothing happened. And this is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. Where it was practiced, senilicide, the killing of the elderly, was rare except during famines. As long as there was enough food to go around, everyone got their share, including the relatively unproductive. Given that the usual diet consisted of fairly dependable catches of caribou, fish, and sea mammals, many years could pass between episodes of scarcity. So this wasn't a routine cultural feature, it was an emergency measure, a last resort, and even then, far more commonly, elders were simply abandoned to die. The whole village might pick up and move away while the old person slept. That detail right there is the one that actually gets under my skin. Not a dramatic send-off on the ice, just everyone leaving in the night. The elder wakes up and the camp is gone. If the villagers were unexpectedly restored to prosperity, they might go back to rescue those left behind. An abandoned person would also be welcomed back as a full member of the community if they could manage to make their way back on their own. But usually they couldn't. That's the real story. Quiet, practical, and almost harder to sit with than the dramatic version. But here's the part that most people never hear, and it's the part that's been sitting in the back of my mind since I started looking into this. Because the most common version of all of this wasn't even abandonment. Most of what has been called senilicide is better described as assisted suicide. In many regions, it was believed that a more pleasant afterlife awaited homicide victims, including volunteers, than those who died by their own hand. So elders would ask to be killed, not because they were forced to, because in their belief system, dying at the hands of a loved one meant a better existence on the other side than dying alone. In hard times, older Eskimos often felt they were a burden and asked their younger relatives to kill them. And in their culture, the person asked to assist was bound to comply with such requests, without expressing any misgivings. Think about what that actually means. A son, a daughter, being asked by their own parent to end their life, and feeling obligated to say yes. That's not a monster, that's a person caught between love and survival with no good options. Now keep that image in your head, because I need to tell you what the fossil record says, and it completely changes the frame. Archaeologist Lorna Tilley knows of about 30 cases in which disease or pathology was so severe that individuals must have had care in order to survive. 30 cases where someone who could not feed themselves, could not move on their own, could not contribute to the group's survival, lived anyway because someone chose to carry them. One of the most striking examples is a young man whose remains were found in what is now northern Vietnam. He had fused vertebrae, weak bones, and other signs that he was likely paralyzed from the waist down before his teen years. The disease would have left him disabled with little use of his arms, meaning he relied on someone else to feed and care for him. And he lived another 10 years, so his family or community must have provided for him 10 years in a group that was already struggling. The people who took care of him scratched out a precarious existence using stone tools to fish and raise pigs. Signs of malnutrition in the bones of people buried nearby suggested famine was a constant threat. And it wasn't just one group in one place. Many Neanderthal fossils belong to individuals well past their biological prime. These old Neanderthals suffered from many of the same ailments affecting elderly people today, conspicuous evidence of arthritis in their joints and limbs, and many were missing most or all of their teeth. Yet these individuals survived disabled for some time prior to their deaths. Those without teeth must have been eating prepared foods which could be easily ingested without chewing, and those with severe arthritis were probably assisted or even cared for by other members of their social group. Someone chewed food for them, someone carried them. In a world where every calorie was a fight, a prehistoric pelvis, nicknamed Elvis, and other fossilized bones represent what researchers identified as the world's first known elderly human with clear signs of aging and impairment. Analysis indicates the male was over age 45 and suffered from a spinal deformity that would have caused him significant pain and forced him to stoop over. The remains date back 500,000 years, and this individual survived long enough to leave bones behind, which means someone, somewhere, decided he was worth keeping alive. So here's what you're actually looking at when you put all of this together. Ancient humans were not cold survival machines who threw out anyone who couldn't pull their weight, and they weren't selfless caregivers who always chose compassion over survival. They were both, depending entirely on how bad things got. In good times, a healthy old person or disabled person was almost never killed or abandoned merely for being a burden. But when the food ran out and the group had to move and the margin between life and death shrank down to almost nothing, the calculus changed, quietly, painfully, without drama. That's the real dark thing they did to survive. Not a cinematic moment on an ice floe, just a group of people who loved each other, running out of options and making the worst possible choice in the worst possible conditions. The same way humans still do today when the resources run out and the decisions get impossible. The line between care and abandonment isn't as wide as we'd like to think. It never has been. If this kind of deep dive into what humans actually did, not the myth, but the real uncomfortable history, is something you want more of, drop a comment and tell me which part hit hardest. Was it the abandonment in the night, the assisted suicide, or the fossils proving people carried their disabled for years? Because I read every single one, and your answers actually shape what I make next. And if you want to keep going right now, there's a video right there that goes even deeper into what Ice Age survival really looked like. And some of what's in it is going to change how you think about modern human behavior too.